Welcome to this, the April update for the Year in Our Garden series. Now, April here in Tasmania is mid-autumn, and as you can see from the deciduous trees that we have growing, autumn is now really well established. This April has been what I think is unusually wet. Now, most Aprils in my memory, I don't have the actual figures to verify this, are a little bit drier than this one. But with this year, we've had some regular rain at least once a week and considerable amounts. We even had 75 millimetres or 3 inches in one session of rain over a couple of days. And that means that the ground now is really wet, and it's going to stay wet until springtime. Now, over April, we have been quite busy. As I look back at what we've done, I'm surprised at how much has gone on despite the rain. So I took some video as we were doing things during the month, and I'll let you have a look at that, and then I'll come back and take you for a little bit of a tour around the garden and show you what's happening right now. Right at the beginning of the month, one of the first things I did was to transplant the volunteer spinach that we had and put it into a bed on its own. Now, I did this with the view of rain coming up, the prediction of rain within 24 hours. And as you'll see again later at the month where I did the same thing with lettuce, this is a great way to work with volunteer plants. However, even though the rain was coming, I still did water these in because I think you cannot rely on weather forecasts. I brought you along for a little special tree planting. It's not very often that I get to plant trees now because most of our property, or the garden area anyway, has established trees and is fairly full. But this tree is a special one that has taken me a few years to get hold of. What it is a cherry guava, or strawberry guava as they're sometimes known. Now, when I was a child in New South Wales, we had one of these trees and it was quite large, and I really remember enjoying picking the beautiful red guavas off it. They're only a small size, they're a large cherry size, and I've always wanted to try growing one here. Now, I have seen 2 of these growing in Tasmania. There's probably more, but I've only seen 2 myself, one in a private garden and one in the Botanic Gardens in Hobart. Both were doing okay in fairly protected positions. I know that they are quite capable of withstanding frost because where I grew up there was lots of frost in winter, but they also had the hot summers. So I'm positioning this one here that it's totally protected from the wind and will be quite warm when the sun comes in. I think it should do well. I was unable to buy a plant in Tasmania at all. None of the nurseries had them. I think there is a quarantine in terms of bringing guava trees and plants into Tasmania. I was, however, able to obtain seed. I got a packet of seed, planted it, and this is the only tree that I've managed to produce from that packet of seed. I don't know why it didn't germinate better. Maybe I didn't give it the right conditions, but at least I've got one, and realistically that's all I need. So what have I done here? I've just loosened this soil up a bit, and I've added a small amount of blood and bone in, which I've dug through the soil. You'll notice that there's a fair bit of clay, and that's the natural soil below just a couple of inches. That's what we've got here. So that's what it has to get used to growing in. How it will go, I'm not certain. Let's pop it in. That'll come out. Yep, there it is. And the roots are just starting to come through, so it's really an ideal time. Being autumn is a good time to put out citrus into your garden, and avocados if you're able to grow them. And I think this type of tree should do quite well. Planting out, we've had some rain yesterday, and we've got more expected today, or tonight at least, and for a couple of days. So we're going to get more regular rain, and that'll settle it in really well. Main thing, this hole's a little bit too deep, so bring it back. And look, planting trees is no great skill, but a simple thing. Give them a nice start and away they'll go. Now my second step here really is to water it in well, and once it's well watered in, I've got quite a lot of mulch that I can put around it, some straw across this whole area, and also I might put some protection around it in terms of a bag to protect it from anything that might damage it in the short term until it gets growing. It's now about a week into April, and I've come today to plant my garlic. The area that I'm planting in, as you see, is under plastic. Now it's got a few humps in it, and I'm thinking that there's probably some potatoes under there trying to come up. So basically I've got to take this plastic off and clean those out and get it ready to plant. In preparing the soil, I will add some blood and bone, because garlic does love some good nutrition in the soil. Now, what am I planting? As usual, I'm planting some traditional purple garlic that is proper garlic, and also some elephant garlic. Mostly actually the elephant garlic. The reason is I find the ordinary garlic really good in the early part of the year. It comes earlier to harvest, and then you've got it in December through, you know, probably until now to April that you're mostly using that. And after that we go to using the elephant garlic. I really like it because even though it's not as strong, it keeps so well, and that means that we'll then use it all the way until December, until the fresh garlic crop comes in again. So I probably plant around about 3 times as much of the elephant garlic as I do as the proper garlic. Once I've got those in, I simply cover them with the wheel hoe and they're set. Finally, it's time to harvest the pumpkins. In terms of numbers this year, I'm not too unhappy. There's a total of around about 26 pumpkins. There's one we've already harvested and 25 here today. But they're all a little bit on the small side, or mostly. There's one here that you'll see that is the size that I would really like to see all of them at, and it's the size that these can grow to as a good pumpkin. But the others are all that little bit small. But still, there's quite a bit of food here that'll keep us eating for quite some time. The other issue that I've had growing pumpkins here in Tassie, well, at my place at least, is that I can get quite a bit of damage to the skin. Now, there's one here today that has it, and it's actually, you probably can't see from there, but it's actually a little bit soft, and so there's actually damage to the skin where it was sitting. Now this one was sitting in straw, but we've had quite a bit of rain in the last 2 or 3 days, and so it was quite damp, and I think that's part of the catalyst. I have noticed though that when pumpkins in the past years have actually sat on soil, they actually get a lot more damage than this. So this year I did experiment, and with this one here, you'll see this nice big one, that there's virtually no damage. It's a really good pumpkin, no skin damage, and so should keep really well. What I did with it was I actually had built this little seat for it, which actually kept it off the ground, and with some shade cloth meant that it wouldn't stay damp, any moisture would drain and air was able to come around it, and it's done quite well. So I only did that with a couple of pumpkins. The others, mostly I tended to put some extra fresh straw under them probably 3 or 4 weeks ago to actually lift them, because the straw that I originally put down here was decaying away, and that fresh straw has helped, and so the majority are quite good. You might see an occasional mark on some, but generally quite good. So most of these should keep fairly well, and I'm quite happy in that way. There's a couple here that are going to be a little bit on the immature side. You can see The stalk is still green. I've got no choice but to harvest them now because the vines are drying off. Yes, the flavour won't be quite as good as a fully mature pumpkin like this. But all in all, it's quite a good contribution to food in the house. And this pumpkin is a really tasty pumpkin. It's a sweet grey, and I think one of the better ones that I've tried here in Tassie. I find that one of the easiest ways to actually grow plants from seed is to allow them to volunteer. In this bed I had lettuce growing over last winter, and in the spring I allowed it to go to seed. I've left it here pretty much all summer. The seed is scattered. Now in autumn the seed is coming up beautifully. This is a winter cos type lettuce, and you can see there's lots and lots of plants here without me really putting any significant effort in. I don't really want to grow the lettuce in this bed again. I will allow some to grow over winter, but early in the spring I want to come and plant other things into this bed. So what I'm going to do today is take out some of these plants, relocating them into a bed, a couple of beds behind me, so that I can then space them out, and in that bed allow some again to go to seed over the summer. I find with lettuce this is a particularly easy way to cope with it. There are other plants that it's probably better to collect the seed and keep it and plant it deliberately, but lettuce, this is just the easiest way to do it. Now, the best time to transplant seedlings like this is when you know that the following day is going to be rainy or at least cloud. And I've looked at the weather and that's what I'm expecting for tomorrow. We've had a lot of rain recently, and it looks like not only tomorrow but probably a large amount of this coming week, next week, is going to be quite wet. So it's a great time to actually get these seedlings out, get them planted into the new bed. I will still water them in because despite the fact that rain is expected, it's really not a bad idea to give them some immediate water to help them cope with the shock. And of course you can never guarantee when that rain's going to come. So now that you've seen some of the things that we did through the month, not forgetting of course that we also were harvesting apples as well, and the grapes also were picking, and still are actually. There's still grapes there and need to be harvested in the next few days, and still apples to pick as well. Those things have kept us pretty busy through the month. Now, one thing also Elizabeth did modify here, cleaned up an area that was a bit messy next to the garden and turned it into what's going to be a decorative section. She has planted some small plants in there, so it's going to look really nice. I unfortunately didn't get any film of when she was doing that, but it is a considerable improvement. The flower garden, of course, has continued to deliver with flowers coming steadily over the month, and there was the dahlias earlier in the month, though the wind and the rain starts to damage those now. And really now the colour is more about the autumn leaves that are coming than anything else. So moving on here to the veggie patch, you can see that with the rain everything has been growing really well. And of course with rain and cloud it means that it actually isn't quite as cold as it could otherwise be if we had fine weather and clear skies. The potatoes are doing nicely because of the variation of which they came up with, which you might remember what I mentioned last month. It means some of them are now starting to look towards the end of their life, while others are still growing actively. But it's looking a lot more like there could be a reasonable amount of potatoes under these. So we can only hope, though as I've said previously, my experience is the autumn crop is always a lot smaller. As you'll see, the brassicas are really grown in this time. And this is the time you need to get that growth, because if things like the cabbages are going to achieve some hearting by winter and actually be usable, you need to see them really growing at this time of the year. The broccoli are almost about to start producing heads, so it won't be long, probably before the next month is over, we will be beginning to harvest some of the broccoli. But the collie, the cabbages are going to be a little bit longer. The spinach there has been heavily picked over the month, and really I need to try and grow lots and lots more spinach earlier, because we really do use it when we have it, because it's really nice to have that green. But something that is worth remembering is that when you're growing brassicas, be it cabbages, collies or broccoli, you do have that leafy green. We think of kale as, yes, we can use those leaves because that's what we grow it for, but you can also use these green leaves off the broccoli and the cauliflower. I did a taste test the other day with Samuel, and we both agreed that the collie leaves were the tastiest. They seem to have more sugars in them and are really tasty to eat. The broccoli maybe has more nutrition. You can see how much darker it is, but you can certainly add these leaves to whatever you're making. And I think the cauliflower would go probably acceptably in a salad too, as a fresh green rather than cooking it. A couple of times across the month I did need to come into these brassicas and clean them up. Look, it doesn't take very long to go through them with the fork hoe and also the wheel hoe and keep the weeds under control. It becomes harder as it gets wetter to do this, but I was able to do it a couple of times during the month. So that's kept things looking not too bad. Now here in the raised beds, as you've seen already, I have done some transplanting of volunteers. I also cleaned out some of the things that had finished. So what we're actually harvesting at the moment? Well, as you can see, lots of silver beet still available. It's growing really well this time of the year. We not only eat it ourselves, but also feed quite a bit to the hens because they really enjoy it and give good eggs. We are still harvesting carrots. There's heaps of those there, and some beetroot still picking. The leeks are now almost ready. We have used some, but you can start at this stage, but they're going to actually get bigger as the year goes on still. But they're looking quite good. And so a really good thing to grow for autumn and for winter. But there's not a lot else coming here at the moment. That's pretty much all that's coming out of these raised beds. So you can see how it is beginning to decline now that autumn has come on. The area here where the tomatoes, the corn and the pumpkins were is looking pretty rough. It really needs to be cleaned up. The tomatoes have all but finished. There's maybe half a dozen there that could be picked still, but hardly anything left at all. The corn I have actually put under plastic. Since we harvested all that, I've laid it down and put black plastic over it to control it. The pumpkins, which I only picked about a week ago, I haven't done anything with that, and it's been too wet. So it's something that I will get to. I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks that it's going to be a little bit drier and I can get in here, clean it up and start preparing it for what I need to do for the next crop that's going to come in here, which will be the early crop of potatoes. Now, it's worth noting that you saw the garlic planted here, which was around about 3 weeks ago. The proper garlic has come up and is pretty much all showing itself there. That was the purple true garlic, but the elephant garlic, which is actually a leek, there's no sign of it at all. Now, I did accidentally dig one out when I was scratching through here to keep the weeds under control the other day, and I noticed that there was a lot of root development on them, but no sign of any shoots coming through the top. It usually does take another month at least before we see anything come out of the ground. They're really slow, but it will happen. You often think, they're never going to come through, but they do. So nice to see with that garlic that it is really quick and you know you've actually got something underway. So in the greenhouse here, you'll see that the cucumbers are pretty much finished. There's 1 or 2 small ones coming, but they're not going to last much longer. It really is just getting too cool for them now, and also not enough light. So while there's this bit of growth, they're really finished. There's not going to be much. The major crop of interest here in the greenhouse is this corn, and as you can see, it's starting to darken off and drop a little bit. I don't think it's going to be very much longer before we're able to start picking this. And I'm going to be really interested to see what it's like. But I think it might be still about another 2 weeks, I'm guessing. But it's going to be really interesting whether we can actually produce something worthwhile off this. Beside me here also, we are still picking the Gardener's Delight tomatoes that were grown in straw bale. They are still looking quite healthy, with still tomatoes developing, and so they will continue on for even another 2 months probably, which is really good to have that late tomato production. Before finishing, I wanted to bring you here and show you how the avocados have gone over the summer. They're alive, but realistically they haven't done anything significant in terms of growth. This summer realistically wasn't, while we had a few hot days, it wasn't a really warm summer, and being their first after a very hard winter, I'm not surprised they really didn't do anything. What I need to do now is to actually get some plastic and close this in so that we keep it a little bit warmer across winter, and I can keep some of the frost, the cold that might come in from the side out. So that's something I will do in the next couple of weeks. Before we get any frost, is to actually get some plastic around this side. I should have done it last winter, but I think it is going to be something really worthwhile doing. So what am I going to do in the next month? Well, I won't be planting anything outside. The only thing I will be planting is some potatoes in the greenhouse to try and grow some overwinter potatoes, and I will start one bed of those probably within the next week or so. But in the greenhouse is the only place that I would actually do any planting. I may also try and plant some more spinach seed in there to see if we can get some more going across winter. And if space allows, I would also plant some broccoli in the greenhouse. But from now on, as I said, I won't be planting anything out of doors. There are some jobs that I have to achieve, such as this one. I also need to get the tamarillo covered. It's grown really well across summer after the pruning that I gave it in the spring, but it now needs to be covered so that the frost doesn't get at it. So that's been the April roundup, and I hope your gardens have done very well through the summer and you're preparing for winter if you're in this part of the world. Or if you're in Northern Hemisphere, of course, you'll be preparing for summer.